The synthesis of a scientific life of survival, one road, many landscapes, number 1651, May 21, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category Life Reflection. Preface. Yesterday, I received a short email from my former MIT professor, Norman Jones. Although the message was brief, carried deep meaning for me. Professor Jones wrote, "Dear Jerry, thanks for your email message that you sent earlier today. Your achievement is remarkable. Not only have you saved your own life without the intervention of medicine, but you have revealed much clarity and shown others how they can improve their own lives." I was impressed by the practical solution which I mentioned in item 2 in an attached email that I sent to you earlier. It is a truly remarkable achievement, which deserves to be more widely known. In order to give others in similar situations so much more hope. With best wishes, Norman. His words caused me to pause and reflect. For many years, I never viewed my work as a traditional medical research program. My primary objective was survival. I wanted to understand obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, aging, stroke, and recovery because these conditions directly affected my own life. My body became my laboratory. My diseases became my teachers. My papers became a scientific diary documenting what I learned each day along the way. Only later did I realize that some of those lessons might also help others. My path was not saving myself through saving others. It was almost the reverse. I first focused on understanding and preserving my own health. The practical lessons that emerged from that journey eventually became available for others who might wish to apply them to improve their own health and perhaps save their own lives. Professor Jones's email also reminded me of something deeper. Looking back across nearly 17 years of biomedical research, I can now see connections that were not obvious when I was younger. Many readers may view my papers as moving among unrelated subjects: Newton, Steve Jobs, mathematics, physics, engineering, viscoplasticity, diabetes, stroke, topology, artificial intelligence, semiconductor chips, psychology, zoology, geopolitics, aging, longevity, and many others. However, in my own mind, these subjects have always been interconnected. Scientific research has already demonstrated that psychology and physiology continuously influence one another. Different application domains often serve as validation exercises for the same research methodologies of viscoplasticity and topology. Beneath these seemingly different topics, I see recurring patterns of interaction, adaptation, instability, recovery, and survival. This is not a theological discussion about spirit, religion, Christianity, or Buddhism. It is a scientific discussion. I am simply searching for common principles that appear repeatedly across different subjects, systems, and observations. To some readers, my papers may appear to jump across many different subjects. To me, however, it feels like walking along the same road while passing through different landscapes and scenery. The scenery changes, but the road remains the same. This paper is a reflection on that road. Introduction. After completing paper No.1650, I found myself reflecting more deeply on the journey behind my research than on any individual result. This reflection may be partly due to aging, but it is also the natural consequence of spending nearly 17 years working at extremely high intensity, often more than 15 hours per day and over 100 hours per week, while continuously collecting and analyzing data from my own body. Looking back, I can now identify several major milestones along that journey: understanding obesity and diabetes, building longitudinal biomedical data collection systems, developing VMT energy and VPT concepts, applying AI and neural network thinking, studying aging, cancer, CKD, CVD, and dementia risk, surviving a hemorrhagic stroke, recovering from seizures and cognitive challenges, rediscovering topology after nearly 60 years, connecting Isaac Newton, Norman Jones, VMT, VPT, and TSI, an extension of Newton's F equals mx a into a more unified framework. Risk is not additive, it is compounding. One question behind everything. At first glance, these milestones may appear unrelated: Newton, mathematics, engineering, viscoplasticity, diabetes, stroke recovery, topology, artificial intelligence, and geopolitics seem to belong to different worlds. However, they were all driven by the same underlying question: how do complex systems behave, adapt, become unstable, recover, and survive over time? This question is closely related to human health and life. It first emerged during my engineering study years, continued through my professional and entrepreneurial career, expanded into biomedical research, and continues to guide my work today. This realization explains why I often move comfortably among mathematics, physics, engineering, medicine, and of complex systems. I am not intentionally changing subjects. I am simply following the same question wherever it leads. The applications changed, but the underlying inquiry remained remarkably consistent. This paper examines that continuing thread and how it gradually evolved into a more unified view of topology, energy, dynamics, health, and survival. A scientific diary of survival. Gradually, I stopped thinking of my papers as traditional medical publications. A more accurate description is a scientific diary of survival. The primary purpose of my work was never publication. It was survival and recording what I learned. Along the way, I wanted to understand obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular risk, aging, and eventually stroke because these problems directly affected my own life. My body became my laboratory and my diseases became my teachers. Throughout that journey, I carefully recorded observations, experiments, failures, successes, and lessons learned. Only gradually did I realize that some of those lessons might also be useful to others facing similar challenges. My original goal was never to teach or publish, it was to understand my own conditions and improve my chances of survival. Any benefit to others emerged later as a natural consequence of sharing what I learned. This is why my papers often resemble engineering notebooks, learning journals, and personal research diaries more than conventional academic publications. Each paper captures a particular stage of understanding, while the collection as a whole documents a continuing journey of observation, experimentation, recovery, and self-discovery. Paper No.1650 is a milestone. Paper No.1650 represented an important milestone, not because of the number itself, but because it encouraged me to look backward. The paper connected several major influences across more than 5 decades: Newton and Norman-Jones, greater than myth, engineering, chronic disease, stroke, survival, helping others for the first time. I clearly recognized that these seeming blind-related experiences were actually part of one continuous intellectual pathway. Newton taught the world to search for hidden laws behind nature. Professor Norman-Jones taught me how systems respond to force, stress, deformation, and time. My own diseases forced me to apply those lessons to the most personal laboratory imaginable, my own body and my life. What once appeared to be disconnected events gradually revealed themselves as chapters within a single story. Multiplication creates geometry. Geometry creates energy. One of the most interesting conceptual connections emerged from my recent work involving TSI stroke, VMT energy analysis, and VPT model including topology. Newton's famous equation, F equals mx, demonstrates how multiplicative entropy creates force. A similar sequence appears in my TSI stroke model, stroke risk equals glucose x ppx creates the TSI stroke wearing signal. The TSI signal creates a trajectory. The trajectory creates strain-stress geometry. The geometry generates VMT energy which damaged my organs, tissues, and cells. Viewed this way, VMT energy is not something artificially added afterward. It is a natural downstream consequence of the original multiplicative interaction. This understanding helped explain an observation that had puzzled me for some time. Small changes in glucose, pulse pressure, and systolic blood pressure often produce surprisingly large changes in TSI geometry. The resulting VMT energy could also change substantially because both geometry and energy are downstream manifestations of the same multiplicative interaction. The relationship can be summarized in a simple chain. Multiplication creates force-like interaction. Interaction creates trajectory. Trajectory creates geometry. Geometry accumulates energy. And energy reflects stability, damage, adaptation, and survival. This chain links Newton's mechanics, Norman-Jones's viscoplasticity, and my TSI VMT biomedical framework into one continuous conceptual pathway. Topology and energy. During recent discussions, I finally found a clearer way to describe the relationship between topology and VMT energy. For many years I intuitively understood the difference, but I could never express it clearly. The explanation eventually became simple. Topology shows the external geometric trajectory of a system over time, while VMT energy quantifies the internal strength generated by the interaction between output strain and input stresses. In simple terms, topology describes the path, while energy describes the power behind the path. VPT reveals the geometry of a journey. whereas VM2 reveals the internal strength generated by the interaction between output strain and input stresses. Both describe the same system from different viewpoints. From snapshots to movies, this also explains why I have always preferred longitudinal observation over isolated clinic measurements. A snapshot captures a moment. A movie reveals a story. After observing fluctuating TSI stroke values more than 20 times per day for nearly 300 days following my stroke, my brain gradually stopped treating them as numerical digits. Instead, the values evolved into an intuitive warning signal, almost like watching a movie unfold inside my mind. Through thousands of repeated observations, I began recognizing patterns, trajectories, changes in direction, periods of stabilization or destabilization, and accumulated loading through vivid mental images rather than isolated numbers. The movie became more important than the individual frames because the trajectory revealed both geometry and energy. Conclusion: looking back, I now understand why many readers from traditional medicine field find my papers unusual. They often see many separate subjects, whereas I see one continuous investigation. For more than half a century, I have pursued variations of the same underlying inquiry regarding system behavior, adaptation, instability, recovery, and survival. I have explored these questions across 7 universities, multiple industries, hundreds of business entities on Wall Street, and ultimately within the most complex system I know, my own body. The settings changed from engineering systems to business systems, from chronic disease to stroke recovery, from topology to geopolitics, yet the central question remained remarkably consistent. Paper No.1650 helped me recognize that continuity more clearly than ever before. I began to see a clear lineage connecting Isaac Newton, Norman Jones, and my own life experiences. The subjects and eras were different, but the underlying pursuit remained remarkably similar, searching for the hidden principles that govern complex systems. The subjects may appear different, but the road beneath them has remained remarkably consistent for decades. To some readers, it may look like jumping across subjects. To me, it feels like walking along the same road while passing through different landscapes and scenery. The scenery changes, but the road remains the same. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.